Hello everybody and welcome to this latest video discussion as part of the RICS Tech Partner Programme. My name is Andrew Knight and I've been with RICS for over 12 years now. I sit within the knowledge and practice area of the organisation, looking at the impact of data and technology right across the built and natural environment. And with over 110,000 members working worldwide, right across the property life cycle, from land planning and development, construction, valuation, brokerage, finance, asset building, surveying, building management, clearly a rich canvas upon which the benefits of data and technology are having a profound effect. And indeed, our members work across all the major asset types, whether that's land itself, residential, commercial, alternative assets and infrastructure. So once again, a huge broad canvas that technology is having a revolutionary effect. And I'm really glad to be chatting to Mads from RIB Software today. So welcome, Mads, to the call.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Pleasure for me to be here.
Indeed. And it's always nice, before we kick off into the bits and bytes, just get a bit of background on yourself and RIB Software for those who perhaps aren't familiar with RIB.
Absolutely. So, quick introduction of myself. My name is Mads Bording. I'm Danish, based out of Copenhagen. Have a checkered background in investment banking, but got out of that before spending some years in management consultancy, mainly focusing on digital transformation, before having spent the past 20 years working with software and innovation specifically for the construction industry. So really, my heart and soul sits in that interlock between business and the construction industry, digitizing that last frontier, absolutely purpose-driven, targeting efficiency and sustainability to uplift the quality and the output of our industry while minimizing the carbon footprint that we leave behind, and equally so the amount of embodied carbon. I'm currently the Chief Strategy Officer and Chief Marketing Officer in RIB. We are a global technology company that works specifically in the construction industry, so that's our vertical. And just slicing and dicing that a bit further, there's design, build, and operate. So we are specifically catering for the build part, so engineering and execution of projects, partnering with other software vendors when it comes to the design, whether that is 2D or 3D, and equally so on facility management, asset management, and operation and maintenance subsequently.
Now, to set the scene, Mads, I'd like to almost get your views on the conclusions of the McKinsey and Company report on the AEC sector that talked about it as being, to be blunt, one of the least digitized industries around the globe. Why do you think that is, and what are the consequences we're now dealing with of that lagging behind, that slowness of the sector to digitize?
See, I actually want to answer that by starting in a slightly different place, because in many ways I feel that the people working in the construction industry are hugely innovative, because if you look to the boundary conditions around construction and the tools available, what they're doing is actually quite amazing. There's a tendency to knock people over the head and saying that they're not adopting technology, they're not moving fast enough, etc. Well, I think that we, the industry, the software industry, we have a responsibility to give them tools that actually helps them to do the job much better. In terms of adoption, McKinsey, they're probably correct. I've worked closely with McKinsey in my past, looking to turning out analysis on the construction industry as a whole. And I think that agriculture and hunting is an industry or industries that sits on a lower rate of digitalization than the construction space, with a lot of velocity in agriculture, because if you look to some of the mega farms that are now emerging, they have autonomous vehicles, they use drone surveys, they're using image recognition and AI to see what the biodiversity is, not just to spray all the crops, but really focus on where it's needed to be, again, to minimize the amount of chemicals that they use, be more efficient and more profitable. Construction is a very complex industry, because if you look to the value chain, it's a bunch of legal entities that have to collaborate. However, the contracts that are awarded, the essentially legal documents are not integrating the stakeholders, but rather keeping them apart. I would say the same for the vast majority of the tools that are being used. in a very linear process. They have these individual silo tools that again are ring fencing the specific traits and what they're doing, even within the same organization, that limit the visibility. The second topic that I believe has an impact is the duration of a construction project. See, when you start to engineer a concept, when you're in the early design, when a project matures, along that way, tools are being chosen by the respective stakeholders. They're all being chosen there to mitigate risk and to be more efficient. And once they have been set there in an interlock where that is the tools that we're using until we close out the project. So imagine that a construction project in average takes 5 years. That means that we're not introducing new technology, we're not making regime shifts, we're not improving what we are doing or utilizing innovation in that duration of time. So that creates a more stepped approach as opposed to really and truly getting the industry into an exponential drive. So that's some of the factors that plays into that. However, in that sits opportunity, absolutely, because construction is repetitive in many ways. For 20 years, I've been claiming that it's glass, steel, and concrete. So, hey guys, we've done it before. I know that there is a fair bit more complexity to it than that. However, there is a lot of repetitiveness in what we do, and I do believe that we can learn a lot from what has happened in the industrial space and bring elements of that into how we plan and think construction, and absolutely also how we execute it to leapfrog forward.
And it's probably a fair point to make that there are a number of shifting challenges that the AEC industry face at the moment. How do you see digitization and overall transformation actually helping to solve those challenges?
In general, I see that digital tools is an enabling element. Construction projects are getting more and more complex. We have new requirements coming in. We have legislation changing. We see actually with BIM models becoming the norm and not the alien project, that the amount of documents, transmittals, RFIs is increasing dramatically. So the more information that we have only adds to that level of complexity. See, this is where great technologies should act as a mitigator. It should act as an enabling element to really be able to build better and more efficiently based on those data points that we now have. Make us more proactive, because with that information flow coming back and forth at much higher rate and velocity, theoretically, we're putting the industry in a position where they can make better choices. All we basically need in that is to ensure that it's the right information that flows to the right stakeholder at the right point in time. This is something that computers are great at. This is something that software is great at. So we can take a lot of the tribal knowledge and the tacit knowledge out of that equation and try to introduce technology as an enabling element to be proactive instead of reactive, allowing stakeholders to identify and eliminate risk instead of just distributing that downstream. Because we really and truly have learned since the pyramids that business model doesn't really work.
And Mads, when you think about, I mean, you talked about, that one of the challenges is just the sheer length of projects, let alone the operational phase. I mean, from that kind of benefit of digitization, do you see some specific stages in the life cycle where it's really critical, or is it a general theme throughout? And I guess linked to that, what's RIB offering at these particular points of the life cycle to really help the sector?
So generalizing grossly here, with the industry being project centric, there's a tendency to make choices in terms of the digital tooling based on a project. That's a best of breed strategy, and for some that might be the right one. However, there is a disconnect for me personally in my convictions in terms of capturing data and opening up the suitcase of artificial intelligence and how that can and will enable us to drive predictions, to take that tacit knowledge and make that company IP, etc. I really see it as an imperative to start farming and collecting that data in a structured approach. So that on one side speaks to having an enterprise approach to how to capture data and treat that as an asset. Short story on AI, or just a few words on AI. AI is super basic. It's an algorithm. It's code. It's binary. The AI, the algorithm, will never be better than the data upon which we train it. So imagine, Andrew, you and I being two general contractors, and I have been capturing my data for the past 3 years in my planning stage, estimation, scheduling. I also have my actual cost. I also have my change orders, RFIs. I have all those data points aggregated. So in terms of volume of data compared to you, who have had all that sitting in various tools and point solutions, and it's been treated as an outcome of a process and not as an asset, I have a fairly advantageous starting point in using that data to identify risk, learn from my past projects, introducing feedback loops, double loop learning. In that sense, I'm in a position where I can much better utilize all that to be more selective on what I do well, so where risk is more minimal. I can probably also execute my projects more efficiently and utilize modern technologies such as image recognition, and really benefit from the BIM models designed all the way through the execution process to the project closeout. So having an opinion about data, I actually think is an imperative. Any business, whether it's a software company such as mine, whether it's a general contractor or manufacturing company, we need to have a strategic opinion about data. The second topic is quite closely related. I often talk about the cause and effect in construction. And I'm going to use a general contractor here again as an example. So we get a design, 2D drawings, a 3D model. We start to work with the quantities. If that design is updated, the quantity typically also change. My estimator, he's already working on our pricing, but he's working in a different tool. So all those update and changes, even though they have a causal impact on the work that he or she should be doing, sits in two different systems. So now it's a manual process for me to knock on the door and remind Mr. Graham to update the estimate, or it's an email, or it's an Excel log. Then that is passed on to the folks that need to do the planning and the scheduling, and we create that triangulation between time, cost, and eventually quality. Because if there is slippage between the work that we're doing, that causality effect will lead to quality issues on site that needs to be rectified. And with anything in life, there's always a check that needs to be picked up. So I think that we need to have an opinion on the way that we build. I highly suggest to build virtually before executing physically. I highly suggest to make sure that the tools that we are using sits in an ecosystem, so when there is a design update, that is reflected in the way that we estimate, in the way that we schedule, so that we can use that triangulation or integrated 5D BIM, as we call it, to have a digital representation that we can optimize, fully understanding the causality effect or that butterfly effect when we do these changes. In that, we have an ability to look at the project from different vantage points. Cost. Hey, we want to minimize the cost. Or schedule. We will be more efficient if we sequence the work differently because this, that, and the other. We can see those things because we know which resources are available, which resources are needed. Or in terms of sustainability, which is in the sixth dimension. So we can turn this on the side and basically treat the project from the same way with resources and cost, but look at it from a sustainability point of view. Here addressing embodied carbon. So looking at the material choices we've made. And Let's use concrete as an example. If I want to build more sustainably, if I want to present a solution to my customer that is more sustainable, I can just change the concrete mix. There's concrete mix available that has 20 to 30% less embodied carbon in it. The price of that is not monetary, it's time, because the curing time is longer. So that has an impact on my schedule. So this speaks very much to, if I want to create something of a higher quality, it may not necessarily have a cost impact. It has a schedule impact in this example, but I need to show that and be able to simulate that to present a better project to my customer. Same goes for swapping out materials. So a reinforced wall, I want to swap that out with cross-laminated timber. That has a time and a cost impact. But dear Mr. Customer, this is the alternative. Can we have a discussion on those solutions to find what fits the bill the best? Same goes in execution. When you have an integrated solution, that's where you have your planned and your actual, and you can monitor that in real time. I bet you 10 years from now, and that's pretty scary to predict something 10 years out for a technology guy, but still I'm going on a limb here. Even with all that data that I talked about, those integrated solutions, AI enablement, we will still see changes happening during the execution phase. There are change orders coming from the clients. There are slippage that somehow will create changes that we need to rectify in the most efficient way. Changes is not only about adding stuff to a contract or subtracting stuff for a contract. It's also about waste and rework, and in that avoided emission and scope 4. So we really want to ensure that we can build efficiently, that we have very good visibility, that we can mitigate risks so that we don't have to put so many contingency pools into the way that we contract, and instead produce profit. If we eat our contingency pools due to lack of visibility, collaboration, planning, the ability to be proactive and solve big problems while they're small in execution, that's when that contingency pool evaporates. That's when we see slippage. That's when we start to eat into the profit margins. But wouldn't it be much better if we could actually build and deliver within time and budget, so that we could deliver higher quality assets to our owners, and they could subsequently put more projects into the market? So, you know, essentially we would not only have the same work, we would have more work. The industry is growing with a CAGR of 6.5% till 2032. So there is more than enough work to do. And I do fundamentally believe that we need to find a more efficient way of doing that, because we have labor shortage, and so far there is no sign in moon and star that will change. So in that, it also becomes an imperative to be able to harness those efficiency gains, capture those feedback loops, those lessons learned, and ingrain that into company IP, into the processes, into the templates that we utilize. Rework is not efficient. It's not a sustainable way of making more revenue or margin. I would claim there is no margin, but because that is just tying resources to a project instead of efficiently closing them out and getting on to the next one. Technology.
Matt, you mentioned a couple of things there. Sorry to interrupt. You mentioned a couple of things there around labour shortage, obviously the sustainability drivers. I mean, what sort of other trends are you seeing in the market, and how's that affecting RIB's view about what their future offerings should be? Because as well as the sector evolving, clearly your solutions need to evolve in parallel and to complement those.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, we have data, and that data model as part of our product strategy. We want to enable companies to capture their data, and that's actually all the stakeholders participating. So if I'm a subcontractor working on a project, I should be able to capture my own data, my own lesson learned, and I should be able to agnostically connect that to whatever solution that fits into. So that's the freedom of data. We believe very much in that. We believe in open ecosystems. I don't believe in that be all and end all. We have no intention of becoming an authoring tool, as an example. We know that Autodesk and Trimble, Tekla as an example, there's great solutions out there. So we want to remain agnostic in that sense, collaborate and create an open BIM ecosystem. Same on the ERP side, same on the FM side. So the only way to really connect that digital thread that can have a continuum through the project's lifecycle is by having that open approach. So we believe in an open ecosystem. We want our applications to be easy to use. We want to use our core expertise, our domain expertise, which is the construction industry, to solve the real challenges in the construction industry. So that's making sure that the estimators have a great solution for work winning. So with the same resources, they can increase their work winning ratio. They can do good risk mitigation, good margin allocation. They can subcontract in an efficient way. The subcontractors are put in a great position for submitting bids because they have visibility on what they need to build, so that they can be as competitive as possible. And again, for them also, do the right risk mitigation so they can be successful on that project. So that's an imperative as well. And we want to be able to at least connect the dots between design and that fuzzy front end and the fuzzy back end of project closeout, commissioning, and handover, making sure that data throughout that process is captured so that that can be pushed out into the operation and maintenance so we can operate our assets in a much more efficient way instead of having that lacking data pool that does a lot of guesstimation in terms of how we then churn over an asset for operation. Whether that's a building or a data center, practically speaking, the process today is more or less the same, and we absolutely want to help and make that more efficient so that the assets are put into their operation part of the life cycle more efficiently as well.
Now, Mads, there's so much rhetoric, understandably, in the marketplace around the concept of digital twins. So I'm really interested to sort of hear almost what you feel the definition of a digital twin should be, and clearly then what the benefits are, because as I say, there's so much talk, and I think, to be fair, I think a misunderstanding in the market about perhaps what digital twins are, and as I say, it'd be great to get your view on that and the benefits of when you get it right.
Our industry is not very good at finding standards that universally apply. So a construction guy in North America is speaking to a construction guy in UK is speaking very different languages. So a digital twin is again a suitcase word that fits very much into that analogy. I'm a firm believer that digital twins has value and again can be an enabling element in transforming our industry. However, there's different definitions of what a digital twin is. Some sit more on the design part. So you have a design based on a concept, specifications, requirements, and you have your architect draw that up. And they can do some fantastically nice rendering. But it is just that. It's a nice rendering that will give you an impression of what this building will end up looking like. Then we need to do various simulations, we need to do engineering, and in that we start to generate more data that has an impact on the design, the visuals, the aesthetics. Then we do various simulations on energy optimization, thermology, topology, this, that, and the other. Again, that's data points that is associated to that design. And we can get a very data-rich 3D representation of the intended asset. For me, that is, and I'm simplifying things here a bit, that is the first iteration of a digital twin. See, the problem with the wording here is, and this is where there is a slight detachment, is that in order to have value from a digital twin, I almost feel like we should apply a view on that twin as being a living organic organism. Because if that is not just a snapshot at a certain point in time between contractual barriers of what the project will look like, I could challenge the value of that. Of course, you can do great simulations, and that is something that you can use to optimize how the building is subsequently operating and functioning in its remaining life cycle. So it absolutely has value. I'm just saying that we can use that to generate even further value. And that is by using that digital twin, the data model, to capture even more data once we go into execution. Because no matter how well we plan the project, how well we estimate, schedule a project, there will be changes. And we need to update that living twin throughout the execution so that we have a fully updated as is digital twin when the project is closed out. So let's just zoom back a little bit and reflect on where we are today. So 90 to 95% of all construction projects are out of budget, out of breaking the schedule. So really having that digital twin should be something that enables us to react in real time. The digital twin is something that we can connect reality capture to, so that we have a live feed where we can apply image recognition and predictions to say, oh, here's something happening where you need to respond. Because we know from projects that this will have this and this and this causality effect, so it will have these and these consequences. So it should be something that helps us to be more effective, and in that aid as an assistant to make proactive decisions, to minimize the negative consequences of changes, so that we ideally will be able to bend the curve from the planned cost and the planned time of a project and try to bend that to deliver projects more efficiently. So ideally, potentially at budget, below budget, at time, ahead of time, and be able to capture those efficiency gains as lesson learned that we as an organization can benefit from.
I guess the challenge there from what you've articulated, Mads, is to get the real value. The kind of level of real-time data capture is quite a challenge there, because to really get that value, to have that true, as you say, almost that organic twin that is really in phase, in time with the real world, whether that's through the construction phase or thinking further along into the operational phase, you are into this world now of, as you say, almost big data, image recognition, image capture, lots of sensors. It really does require a step change from simply having a lot of data about an asset to having that real feedback loop, where ultimately that feedback loop is bi-directional, where you can control the asset in the operational phase based on the information you're getting in real time.
Absolutely correct. I think that there is some steps that we can make already. It doesn't have to be super highbrow. And one example of that is just applying principles from integrated project delivery. So I'm now the client, the end user of an asset. I would really like you, my client, consultant, engineer, to work with the architect, but also with the general contractor, because the general contractor knows how to build. They know all the pitfalls. So early engagement, early involvement will help that. Each and every time we have that interlock between trades and disciplines, we generate data. A conversation is also data, just needs to be captured. So all of that is already happening. We just need the means to capture that and structure that. We need to change our process slightly. The digital twin, well, early preparation and spending a little bit more resources upfront is an imperative. And today's contract schemes typically don't allow for that, even though we will benefit, all stakeholders will benefit greatly from that in the subsequent phases. So the mechanics of how we cookie cut a project and how we distribute the spending, well, here we need to educate the end users as well. We need to talk to the clients. And I actually see that there is a split fork in the road moving forward, where some general contractors are taking it upon themselves to become more of a consultant contractor. So talking to the clients about, hey, we have these and these capabilities, we have these and these enabling technological elements that we can apply. However, we need to do a little bit of this, that upfront, that costs more money, but it will give you greater accuracy. It will secure much better collaboration downstream, and ultimately we think we can deliver a better project to you. And there's other general contractors that are saying, hey, I make the cheddar of the variation. And we've been doing that for 30 years, and we're going to continue to do that for the next 30 years, steady as she goes. And that's all fine, but that's where we strategically need to decide what we want to do. General contractors in general are high revenue organization with high risk and very, very low margins. One of the resources that they depend the most on are people, and that's becoming a more and more and more scarce resource. So in reality, that really puts the executing part of our industry between a rock and a hard place. So there is a need for a regime shift. We must start to think differently. And this is where we, the software companies, we sit in that interlock, and we can innovate and create those enabling elements that can secure that smooth transition. It's not a big bang. It's small steps, it's small increments. It's choosing an organization that share the same vision as you, and then we do that journey hand in hand.
So Mads, as a final question to kind of almost make this real for the people who are listening and viewing, can you talk us through maybe an example of where you're working with a customer to do that kind of regime change, I think as you used a phrase, where it's having that real impact on operations and efficiency, albeit step by step, longest journey starts with a single step sort of thing?
I'll give you two examples actually. So both using a general contractor. One general contractor was approaching us because they basically wanted to increase their work running ratio. So we sat down with the team and we investigated their process of doing so. And like most, it was very manual. It was always in the 25th hour scrambling resources together, making sure that you could tidy things up and put it out the door. Work running ratio was 1 out of 5. In average, every bid that they submitted was at least 100K in euros. So imagine that your starting point when you win a contract is that you already have 500K of chips on the table. So you're starting on a negative balance. And they were winning quite diverse projects. And that was all great, champagne corks are popping, we won a project, but then the folks in execution like, okay, we've not done that before, or do we have the resources for that? But what we looked into that was just taking all the historical quotes that they've submitted, the contracts that they've won, to use that as a pool of big data. With that, they could very, very easily simulate the bids that were coming, or the tender offers that were coming through the door to see, all right, is this a good project for me or not? Taking subsets of data of historical projects of which they've executed, look to the planned cost and the actual cost. So what did we actually end up paying for the different materials, linking that to the quantities and the materials in that project. They were able to take that first initial 0D estimation and map that with their resources. So if I have ready-mix concrete in my inventory that is about to go out, let's use that before purchasing more. Do I have a tower crane available for these and these periods? So really mapping that against their available resources to then see where do we need to subcontract, looking at margin allocation and risk allocation to make sure that you put that on the intelligent parts of the project. So essentially that's about building that 5D estimation where you come full circle so that what you're submitting a bid on is stuff that you know that you can build. You have a nice risk and margin profile on that. You have the resources available so you can do it without having to scramble resources back and forth. In practicality, this organization increased their work running ratio without having to add more resources with more than 100%. But not only that, they were also winning projects that sits in their wheelhouse with the right risk and margin allocation. So practically speaking, they should have a higher project margin on those projects. So that's a fairly simple use case where historical data points can help you to be more efficient, increase your work running ratio, bump up your order book, and if you take that and put the margin line to your EBITDA, that has a transformational impact. Another one is more on that digital twin simulation. It was a big airport in Asia, and the client wanted our help to see if we could shave time off the schedule. I'm a big believer that the profit is either made or lost in the schedule, i.e. how we execute a project. And what we did was we used different methodologies and planning methodologies to sequence the project differently. And we could compare those, again, in that interlock between time, cost, quality, and sustainability to simulate various schedules and sequencing of that building to find the most efficient and sustainable approach to plan out that project. And that ended up by shaving off more than 2 months of the execution of that project. And for an airport, it's a very, very large project. And the sooner that you can operationalize the asset that you're building, you can start to generate revenue. So not only was it faster and cheaper, it was also something that helped them to generate revenue sooner.
I suppose what's interesting. Sorry, carry on, Mads.
No, sorry. I just wanted to say that both those scenarios, those success stories, without being too full of myself, were only possible because we approached an industry that has an integrated problem, because we are trying to solve that in silos with an integrated approach.
Yeah, I guess what I was going to observe listening to that was, I suppose, 2 takeaways for me. That classically one always talked about sort of time, cost, and kind of functionality in a project, but it's almost like we have a square now. We've added sustainability to that kind of that tension between those outcomes. And I think also another piece where, and I see this so much, where the sector across the built environment can sometimes fail because they tend to want to digitize their current process rather than actually step back and say, actually, can the process itself be improved and digitized? Because I think the danger is, if you have a poor process, you can digitize it, but you just end up with a poor digital process. And listening to you, it was a sense of that, A, that 4th dimension of sustainability coming into play, and B, that willingness to step back from an existing process and say, how can we just do this differently?
Absolutely. I'm a technology optimist. I think that technology is an enabling element to create a better world. But we as human beings need to embrace that. In fancy language, that's called a cyberhuman network. But in reality, I want my son to grow up on a better, greener planet than what we have today. So I as an individual, need to embrace that. Reaching a bit wider, I will claim that every organization today, whatever industry you're operating in, you need to embed sustainability into the way that you do business and you run your organization. We're seeing, and I'm coming back to construction now, we're seeing that there's a lot of laws being mandated. There's a lot of tax penalties if you are not building within a certain quote. We see those being tightened. We're seeing that the young generation, the next generation, they don't want to work for polluting, nasty industries. They want to work with purpose and do good. It's not about how much money we pay them. It's about purpose. So if we don't embed sustainability in the way that we do business, and for us, embed that in how we bring offers to our customers so that they are enabled to do so, it will have lots of negative consequences. The end users won't work with an organization that are just building cheap but dirty. They will come with the requirements, because from legislation, they're faced with all these requirements. We see tax changes, so a building that has a lot of embodied carbon will be very expensive over the 80 years that it will be in operation, because it will be taxed harder. There's a risk that you won't be able to rent it out, because nobody wants to occupy a black building if they can be in a nice green one. And here we just need to have a bit of a long lens, but that journey starts today. And again, it's small baby steps, like when you estimate your project, we have a tool called our carbon quantifier. It's free, so we give that to the industry. Spend those 20 minutes it takes just to estimate the embodied carbon profile of your project and see if you can do it better. Utilize that in your communication with your end user, saying, hey, I've given you two services. The one is to estimate the cost of your project, but I also try to estimate the embodied carbon, and here and here and here are areas where I think that we can improve. So adding in and introducing new services, it's not necessarily something that you can monetize, but you can differentiate yourself. And that's part of that journey. So I will encourage any and everybody, as individuals, as organizations, to embrace and embed sustainability in the way that you do business.
Indeed. Well, it's been fascinating to talk, Mads, and I think, as you say, this is as much about human behavior as it is about technology. The technology is there to help us, but we've got to change our behaviors and embrace the change. But for today, thanks ever so much, and I look forward to catching up again in the future.
Andrew, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.